Greetings, everybody. Strategic Sage here. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to step off the beaten path a little bit in this video, just talk about some of my personal annoyances with the game. Those of you who have followed what I do on the channel know that I think it's really quite good. I'm a fan of it for sure, but there are still some things that I wish, personally, that were different. And I will be of minority opinion, I'm sure, on some of these. It's not necessarily things that are objectively bad, just things that I would prefer to be different. Number one for me, for sure, is Galactic predictability. And this is one of those that really sort of drives a wedge, and I'm sure that I am of the unpopular side of this. But I would prefer the game forcing you to adapt more often. For example, you have all the different Galactic configurations. You have all of the different difficulties and factions and all of those. But within that, there isn't much variability. So, like, you're determining most of what it's going to be instead of there being randomness involved. Now, of course, there's quite a bit of randomness in what kind of turret you get and, ARS, etc. But you end up picking up so many different ones of those things, even on a fairly low AIP run, that it all sort of tends to balance out over time. There isn't anything that you pick that's going to make a big difference. I mean, that can happen some with the golems and lone officers, but even the fact that by default those are always on is another thing that's out there. For example, by comparison, in Classic, you could get like the Fabricator for munitions boosters or Sentinel frigates or whatever your personal favorites was. Those could make a big difference if you got those, but you only had a few ship types at the beginning, and then it would expand far beyond that. Most of the ship types that were available you wouldn't see in any particular galaxy. Or the AI could get, like, I had a game where they had early unlocks for Vampire Claws. Or one later when they were doing an AI type that had particularly strong reprisal waves, and they got Xena 3 processors. And I was almost stuck in a feedback loop that was unrecoverable because of how those added to the reprisal waves for all the damage they did. And I had to be extremely careful to get through that game. And those types of things that can really shake it up and make it, a lot harder or a lot easier, or just plain different, not necessarily even harder or easier. I feel like the galaxies in AI War 2 don't have that same type of individualist character. And, I like the more, the sort of roguelike influence, as opposed to the pure build order, this is the way to play, RTS type of style. So that's definitely number one. And the fleet centerpieces are another one. The fact that you just, the worst that happens to them is they're crippled. That they can't be destroyed. Having them just be indestructible. I just don't like the idea of indestructible items to begin with. And, you could have debate about whether, you should be able to rebuild them or not. For example, golems in Classic. Not that AI War 2 has to be Classic in any way, but you lost them and it was permanent. So you put them on a system with a mass driver. It was extremely dangerous and unwise. Even the centerpieces here, I mean, they cripple, you repair them, it's barely even a hiccup. And I think that just encourages a lot of, sort of suicidal tactics like I've used, like just sending out a valuable ship and deep striking because, no matter what happens, it's not going to get destroyed. I can just repair it and move on about what I was doing. It just creates a lot of, in my opinion, really sort of unrealistic tactics. And I wish there was much more of a cost to losing one, because now all it is about really the counterattack, and sometimes you can avoid that completely, and sometimes it just doesn't matter. So I definitely wish that centerpieces had more cost to being damaged and could actually be destroyed. This next one's going to cover a couple of different ideas, but hacking is a big part of the game that just has never sat well with me because you have too much power to reshape the galaxy with it. For example, you've got the 5 different lines in an ARS. And if you like them, you just re-roll them. You don't like a GCA, you just re-roll that. You're not given this sort of take it or leave it, the galaxy is what it is, and you can take the parts that you want to take, don't take the parts that you don't want to take, and having to choose between those things. Instead, it's more, well, I mean, here's what the Galaxy starts out as, but for a relatively inexpensive price, you can just switch it. And you're not required to make difficult decisions very much. That's the same concept with there being way too much hacking unless you're running a really low AI progress game or you've got a major Dark Spire infestation or whatever. Again, you've got enough hacking to often get all the ARS and all the tech vaults and all the fleet capacity extenders and still have more left over for covert knowledge extract. You know, you don't have to pick between those things. You can just have it all. And I think the game is much better. The concept of it, you know, in the backstory it says things like wield your forces like a scalpel, you know, use discretion, don't try to take on everything. And I've always felt the whole hacking system, because people have wanted more and more choices, just sort of runs into that. And it doesn't give you that scenario, as a purist, I realize, I confess that's what I am, but where you're sitting here and every choice is really going to have a significant consequence going forward. It misses that whole aspect. One final annoyance that I have that I think is pretty representative is the ability you have to upgrade locally. That is, you know, your command stations, you can upgrade just those or just this particular battle station, you know, and I have two objections. One is just logical. Why should your tractor arrays or your tachyon arrays or whatever, why should they be more effective in one system than they are in another? Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then also from a gameplay point of view, I think it really runs head on into the whole idea of making the big thematic decisions with your scientific investment. You know, you can sort of massage the rough edges off, finagle those types of choices like, am I going to invest in my offense? Am I going to invest in this hull type? Invest in force fields? Do I want to invest in my economy? Do I want to invest, you know, in this particular turret or whatever? You can just say, well, I'll just upgrade everything in this one little part of the galaxy, and then that'll solve that issue, and then I can reserve the rest of my science for working on other things. I know that was the intent, but I actually think that works against what makes these games excellent. You know, the long-term strategic thinking is just sort of, some of it's sucked out by these types of mechanics. So, let me know what you think. You think I'm full of it? You think these are all good additions to the game? You know, do you agree with what I'm saying? You know, throw up any thoughts about maybe things that annoy you personally. And I'll be back probably next week. I'm going to aim for another patch update because there are a lot of things going on there, but not a good time for it right now as they're working out some bugs. So, more AI War 2 will be coming. Thanks for watching.